Have you ever felt like your life was trapped in darkness with no way out? But when all hope seemed lost, God came with His boundless power. God chose Moses, a leader, to bring the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. With courage, Moses demanded Pharaoh, "Let my people go," but Pharaoh refused. God sent 10 terrifying plagues upon Egypt, warning Pharaoh of his power. That night, God protected the Israelites, and the plague passed without touching them. At last, Pharaoh gave in. The Israelites were free, beginning their journey to the Promised Land. But their freedom didn't last long. Pharaoh changed his mind and chased them with his entire army. The Israelites stood before the Red Sea, desperate and afraid, with no escape in sight. In their darkest moment, Moses raised his staff and called upon the power of God. God answered Moses' call, splitting the Red Sea and creating a path for the Israelites. The Israelites crossed the Red Sea, walking on the path that God had opened. Pharaoh did not relent, and his army rushed into the sea with arrogance. But God closed the sea, drowning the Egyptian army in the deep waters. The Israelites looked back, realizing they had been miraculously saved by God. With deep gratitude, Moses and the Israelites offered prayers of thanks to God, their deliverer. They continued their journey with unwavering faith in God, who guided them. The harsh desert lay before them, but the promise of a better future drove them forward. God led them through the night, ensuring they would not lose their way in the desert's darkness. With gratitude, they sang songs of praise, honoring God for His salvation. Have you ever experienced a moment in life where you felt miraculously saved? Share your story in the comments. Journey in the desert. The Israelites moved deeper into the desert, facing new challenges on their journey to the Promised Land. The desert was not an easy place to live, and they soon felt exhausted under the. Moses prayed to God for help, as his people were in danger from lack of water. God answered, and from a dry rock, water flowed, saving the Israelites. God provided not only water, but also manna from heaven, bread for the desert. Manna became their main source of food, sustaining the Israelites through the long days in the desert. God taught them to gather enough each day, reminding them of trust and obedience. Every day in the desert, they lived with faith that God would provide what they needed. God called Moses to Mount Sinai, where he would give the 10 Commandments to the people of Israel. On the top of Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, the rules for the people of Israel to live by. Moses returned with the 2 stone tablets, carrying God's commandments to guide the people of Israel. The people of Israel listened to the 10 Commandments from God, committing to live by His teachings. Under God's guidance, the people of Israel built the tabernacle so that He could dwell among them. When the tabernacle was completed, God dwelled among the people of Israel, granting them peace and guidance. Each day, the people of Israel gathered before the tabernacle, offering sacrifices and praying with gratitude. Moses prayed, asking God to continue guiding them through the long and challenging journey. With God leading them, the people of Israel continued their journey through the desert, always trusting in His presence. Even in the darkness of night, the tabernacle glowed, reminding them that God was always with them. Moses looked toward the Promised Land from afar, knowing that God would fulfill His promise. Have you ever been on a challenging journey but received blessings in the end? Share in the comments. Facing the challenges. The desert is not just a place to pass through, but a place that tests their faith and patience. When faced with difficulties, they complained and wanted to return to Egypt, forgetting the miracles God had performed. But Moses did not give up. He prayed and sought help from God. God answered by appearing as a pillar of cloud, leading them to a safer place. After long days in the desert, they found a lush oasis, a place God had prepared for them. In the peace of the oasis, they rested and recovered, feeling more deeply the care of God. Moses prayed, thanking God for leading them through the difficult trials. They knew the journey was still long, but their faith in God remained unshaken. God continued to guide them with a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of cloud by day, always present to protect. But it wasn't just the desert. They also faced enemies. Amalek attacked them on the way. In the battle, Moses raised his hands in prayer, and whenever he raised them, Israel prevailed. When Moses grew weary, Aaron and Hur held up his hands, helping to maintain the prayer. Israel won the battle, thanks to Moses' prayer and faith in God. Moses built an altar and named it "The Lord is my banner," to remember the victory God granted. Overcoming all trials, they continued their journey, knowing that God was always with them. Moses taught them about patience and trusting God, no matter the circumstances. Every day, they prayed and felt God's presence in every step they took. Moses never ceased praying, asking God to lead them safely to the Promised Land. They crossed valleys and high mountains, moving forward with unwavering faith. No matter the challenges, God always lit their path, guiding them to the Promised Land. When faced with major challenges in life, what do you do to keep your faith? Share in the comments. Facing doubt and temptation. The journey was not just about geography, but about faith. Many began to doubt, and temptation drew near. While Moses was away, they crafted a golden calf and worshipped it, betraying God. Vunben MCC Hun Moses returned from the mountain and saw the Israelites worshipping the golden calf, and his anger flared. In his anger, Moses smashed the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, and the Israelites were terrified as they realized their mistake. But Moses did not give up. He prayed to God for forgiveness for the Israelites, and they were given a second chance. God responded, giving Moses the new 10 Commandments, once again affirming his covenant with Israel. The people of Israel listened to the new 10 Commandments with deep reverence, committing to live by God's teachings. They abandoned the golden calf, returned to their faith in God, and committed to living by his covenant. Moses thanked God for his forgiveness and for giving them a chance to amend their ways and continue the journey. The people of Israel performed a purification ceremony, renewing their faith and their determination to continue the journey to the Promised Land. They gathered before the tabernacle, offering sacrifices and praying, expressing their gratitude and loyalty to God. Moses taught them lessons from their past mistakes and the importance of maintaining faith in God. Despite all difficulties, the Israelites continued their journey, knowing that God was always with them. Even in the darkness, God guided them, ensuring they would not lose their way. Each night, they offered prayers of gratitude to God, knowing He was always by their side. Moses encouraged them to keep their faith in God, even though the journey ahead was still full of challenges. With faith and gratitude, they sang songs of praise, honoring God for His guidance. With strong faith, they continued their journey, knowing the promised land lay ahead. Moses prayed on the mountaintop, asking God to continue blessing the Israelites on their long journey ahead. Before them was a vast sea, but their faith in God remained unshaken. Have you ever faced temptations or doubts in life? How did you overcome them? Share in the comments. Facing the final enemy. But the final challenge was not over. The Egyptian army was closing in, threatening their freedom. In a moment of despair, Moses prayed once again and raised his staff, calling upon the power of God. God answered the prayer, parting the sea and opening a path of salvation for the Israelites. They walked through the sea with faith in God and hope for true freedom. But the Egyptian army did not give up. They rushed into the path between the sea, determined to capture the Israelites. Moses raised his staff once more, and the sea crashed down, engulfing the Egyptian army in a violent wave. The Israelites looked back, knowing that God had saved them from destruction and brought them to freedom. With deep gratitude, Moses and the Israelites offered prayers of thanks to God, their deliverer. They sang songs of praise, honoring God for His miraculous deliverance. Moses encouraged them to continue the journey, knowing that God was always by their side. Their journey led them through lush lands, nearing the promised land that God had promised. They stood before the promised land, where their faith and patience would be rewarded. The promised land appeared before them, fertile and prosperous, a future full of hope. Moses led the Israelites into the promised land with faith and joy. They set up camp and began their new life, knowing that God had fulfilled His. With gratitude, they offered sacrifices to thank God for His blessings. Moses thanked God for guiding them through all the trials and bringing them to the promised land. They sang songs of praise, honoring God for His guidance and blessings. Moses encouraged them to live by the 10 Commandments and God's teachings to receive His blessings. Their journey had ended, but their new life in the promised land had just begun. Have you ever gone through a challenging journey and finally achieved your goal? Share your story in the comments. In the promised land, the Israelites began their new lives with gratitude and trust in God. In the promised land, the Israelites began their new lives with gratitude and trust in God. Moses reminded them of the importance of living by the 10 Commandments and God's teachings. They gathered together, worshipping and offering sacrifices to thank God for His guidance. In the promised land, the Israelites lived in peace and prosperity, knowing that God always protected them. Moses encouraged them to pass on the 10 Commandments and God's teachings to future generations. Future generations continued to live in the promised land, preserving the legacy and teachings of their ancestors. Moses knew that God had fulfilled His promise, and the Israelites had found their home. They gathered before the temple, offering prayers of gratitude to God for His guidance and protection. Their new life was filled with joy and gratitude, knowing that God was always by their side. Future generations continued to worship God, preserving the legacy and teachings of their ancestors. Moses knew that the Israelites would continue to live in the Promised Land, under God's protection. They sang songs of praise, honoring God for His guidance and blessings. Future generations continued to live in peace and prosperity, preserving the legacy of their ancestors. Moses thanked God for leading the Israelites through all trials and bringing them to the Promised Land. Their new life was filled with joy and gratitude, knowing that God was always by their side. Moses knew that the Israelites would continue to live in the Promised Land, under God's protection. They sang songs of praise, glorifying God for His guidance and blessings. Future generations continue to live in peace and prosperity, preserving the heritage of their ancestors. Are you willing to trust in God's plan for your life? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss other inspiring faith stories. Share this video if you feel encouraged.